Hey guys, it's Ingrid from the Custom Quilter again. Today we're going to do a little starching and quite a bit of cutting. So what you want to do is put a towel or a piece of waste fabric on top of your ironing board to protect your cover. If it gets a lot of starch on it, just wash it, it'll be fine. You want to spray your fabric so that it is completely wet but not dripping. That's just wasting starch. Then you have it folded in half, selvage to selvage, and you don't have to completely open it up. We're going to leave it like that throughout the starching process. When I get to the end of this piece of fabric, and I'm just going to flip it over and do the other side. Do not open it up fully. Once you're done with that piece, you put it on your drying rack and wait until it is fully dry until you iron. Do not try to iron while the fabric is wet. Enjoy! We're going to cut right after this, so hang in there with me. Talk to you guys later. Bye. All right, so we got our fabric that is labeled here, Overcast. That's the color we're gonna be cutting. These are the few rulers that I'm gonna use. This one's 8.5 by 8.5, so it's 2.5. This one is 6.5, and this one is 4.5. The pattern has pieces that are 1.5, 2.5, 4.5, 6.5, and 8.5 increments. And this one I just use to like square up, or if I'm cutting long strips or whatever. I have the fabric folded twice, and I'm going to be cutting on the side that is not marked, so I don't have to keep marking it. All right. So it's marked over here on this side, and I'm going to be start cutting over here on this side. And I have my iron, and of course we have the pattern. This is my handsome grandson Trey, and this is a quilt I'm going to be working on. And this is the pattern. It's broken down into 108 squares. They're 8.5 by 8.5 each one, and there's 9 in a row by 12 rows. All right, these are all the colors that we're using and the yardage. And each pixel is 1.5 by 1.5. Each block is 8.5 by 8.5. And the number of blocks is 108. The finished quilt size is 72 by 96. The seam allowance, 1/4 inch, of course. And the number of pieces in this quilt is 2682. Now, this is the least amount of pieces that I've been working with. The other ones are 35, 36, 32. 100 pieces, so this ought to be a piece of cake. First thing we need to do is figure out which color we're going to be cutting. Now, I've already crossed out these, so you know I've cut those already, and this is what I put them in. So one thing I wanted to make you aware of is these don't go in order like A, B, C, D, E, F. You see, we got A, B, C, D, E, F. Now, the first quilt I made, I did not pay attention to that. I just went by this list and I went A, B, C, D, da, 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 and I didn't pay attention. All right, so on the actual pattern, when you get over here, down at the bottom, it'll tell you A, B, C, D, all the way up to N. Make sure that you label these correctly according to this at the bottom. It's the same on every page at the bottom. Over here, it's gonna be G, H, I, and then probably, you know, every bottom row is mixed up, and D knows that. So they're supposed to be fixing that in the final draft. So hopefully they will, but until they do, please pay attention or you are not gonna be happy. I had to end up taking out like 9 blocks over 2 rows. So the one we're gonna be doing right now is Overcast. It tells you exactly what to cut. Now I'm reading upside down, but it tells you cut 1 rectangle, but it's a square, 8.5 by 8.5. This is 8.5 by 2.5, and so on, all the way down. This last number here is if you were using the grid system, that fusible grid system, and every piece is 1.5 by 1.5, but that's how many you would have to cut at 1.5 by 1.5 of this color if you were using the grid system. But we are not using the grid system, so we're going by this. Just don't worry about that. Okay. The way I do this is I start with the big pieces first, and then if there's anything left over after I'm cutting these, I'll cut those down into the smaller sizes to save fabric. You do have plenty of fabric to cut what you need, but you know, this is my 5th one, and I always keep my leftovers and label them so I can use them next time. All right, here we go. All right, I label these little, I think they're like 2 by 1.5 little labels according to the sizes and the color. And I label each one of my pieces with those. So, first thing we're gonna do is square up the edge. And you'll see me cutting all kind of different angles and all that. Please don't bother telling me. I know I'm jacking up. Oh, and I have a brand new rotary blade in here. That's very important. All right, and the first piece we need is 8.5 by 8.5. So, I have a big square. I'm using all OmniGrid rulers. It's kind of important that you use the same brand of measuring tools because some of them can be off. First, I'm gonna cut, let's see how much 8.5 stuff we got. We got 1, 2, then 3. So instead of opening this up, I'm just gonna cut an 8.5 inch strip. Please take your time to make sure that you are cutting properly because you will regret it later on when you're piecing. Trust me, please trust me. If it's not square, you're gonna find out real quick. All right, so we got one 8.5 inch strip. And now we can open it up because we only need one 8.5 by 8.5 inch square. I did label the other end so I could turn it around. And you don't have to have all these different rulers. I just happen to, and it makes it a lot easier and more accurate also. All right, so I'll take this little label that I made, put it up here, and you can pin it or you can clip it. I'm saving my clips for if I have more than one. Now put it over there to the side. And I check off what I've cut. All right. Next one is we need two 8.5 by 2.5s. So we're gonna do it. We're gonna cut a 5-inch strip. And we're gonna cut a 2.5-inch strip. And I'm making sure it's square on the bottom and this side. Okay, so that's two 8.5 by 2.5 strips. And when they're bent up like that, I got my iron over here. I just hit them with the iron real quick. Or you can leave it and do it when you get ready to sew. Put them together. Put them over there. Now we need an 8.5. Oh, I took to check it up. We need one 8.5 by 1.5. All right. Now we need a 6.5 by 2.5, one piece. So out of this 8.5-inch strip, I'm gonna cut a 2.5-inch piece, and then I will cut it down to 6.5. This end isn't quite straight, so I'm gonna straighten it up. Now that little bitty piece right there made it not square. Now you may think that this is insignificant, but there's so many seams and so many little pieces that if you cut a whole lot of them like that, not square, by the time you get to the end of a 9-block row, you're gonna be off a lot. All right, so this is our 6.5 by 2.5. We only needed one of those. Take it off. And we need a 4.5 by 2.5. One square. All right, so I'm gonna cut this into a 2.5-inch strip because we have other 2.5-inch pieces to cut. We can use what we don't use there. All right. 4.5. And take your time and double check, please. This is not quite square. Another little sliver there. Okay, we only needed one of those. Check it off. 2 4.5 by 1.5s. Let's see if this is 4.5. It is not. We'll save all these little pieces because we can cut smaller ones out of that. All right, this right here. You probably will need to use steam. So if you have not washed and have not starched your fabric and you use steam, your block's not gonna be accurate because it's gonna shrink. I'm just saying. You might just wanna go on and wash it and starch it. All right, we need 2 4.5 by 1.5s. So I think I'm gonna cut some 1.5s because we have some 2.5s, 1.5s, and only one 4.5. So cut a couple of 1.5-inch strips. 3. I like the backwards cut so you don't have to move your fabric. Alright, so we need one 4.5 by 1.5. And I have a 4.5-inch ruler. Make it easy on myself. Oh, we need 2 of those. Okay, is this 4.5? Nope. And we need 4 2.5 by 2.5s. So we'll cut us a 2.5-inch strip. We need 4 of those. We're getting there. All right, now we need 7 2.5 by 1.5. All right, so we got these 1.5s that we had here. We have this 2.5-inch doubled up here. So we're gonna use these. So this is 2.5 and I need a 2.5 by 1.5. When I'm using little pieces, I like to use the smallest ruler I can. Easier to handle. I mean, we need 7. That's 2. 4. And it's a 1.5-inch strip and we need a 2.5 by 1.5. 6. And I'm gonna go ahead and cut 8. I'll have an extra, just in case I mess up, which I normally do. Now this size 2.5 by 1.5 and 1.5 by 1.5 are the most common. Not the most common, but the ones that you cut the most of. But on this color, just so happens I don't need a whole lot of them. Some of them, I'm cutting 250 of the 1.5 by 1.5. So, you know, get your patience on. Now we need 34 1.5 by 1.5 of this color. And I try my best not to cut more than 4 layers at a time, because whenever I cut 8, even with a brand new blade, the ends kind of get raggedy and the pieces are off a little bit. They give me problems later when I start sewing. And when I'm cutting 4 layers, you'll see in a minute when I start doing that, I put them in stacks of 4, but these extras, these offcuts here, I just use them up. No use wasting fabric. When you're doing these, cutting these offcuts, make sure they're square. You'll hear me say that a lot. Make sure it's square, make sure it's square. That's 3. Just gonna cut some 1.5 inch strips to show you when I do 4 at a time. Now the reason I ask you to fold up your fabric and leave the selvage out is when you're starting to cut, you can cut off your fold and the selvage at the same time without having to reposition the fabric again. Oops. I keep them in sets of 4. That's 20 right there. And if you get desperate and you need that, just press it, cut it. If I have a little elbow in there, I won't use that because it'll mess you up later when you're piecing. So we got this many out of a strip. There's 4 in each stack, so that's 24. You get 24 pieces out of one strip. 24 1.5 by 1.5 anyway. That's not my count. 32, and I only need 2 more pieces, so we can use these. I'm pretty sure it's big enough. Let's see. Alright, so we have all of our 1.5 by 1.5 pieces. If you didn't starch, you probably won't be able to stack them up like that. I also have some of these for the bigger stacks. I have some of these, and I use pins. So here's all our overcast colors. I'll mark that one off, and mark off that one. Next color, smoke. Depending on how many I have, like some of the other ones that I have to cut, there's a lot of pieces. So I have these 2 sizes and this size. So I'm gonna use this size for that one. You can fold up your big ones if you want, or however you want to do it. If they get wrinkled up, that's all right. You can always iron them. All right, so when I'm all done with all the colors, we'll come back and we'll start sewing. All right.